Hey, I'm Jeff Baumgartner with Light Reading Cable. I'm very pleased to be joined by Phil McKinney with CableLabs. So, Phil, you've been joined CableLabs to lead it since last June.
Right.
So, we're coming up on a year. So, I mean, if you had to look at things right now, what are kind of your top two priorities right now?
Well, what we've been focusing on really at CableLabs is taking a look back to see how we deliver value to the overall cable industry. We're focusing really on three areas of the strategy. One is increasing the speed or pace at CableLabs. Secondly, really is our focus. What is really the charter of CableLabs? What are those programs and projects that we're working on? And third is really to build out a robust innovation pipeline.
Okay. And you mentioned kind of pace of innovation. So, at this point, you've had a chance to dig in and see what's going on. I mean, what have you been able to find out so far in terms of how cable can kind of improve its pace of innovation?
Well, one of the things we did is we went back and looked at all of the work that CableLabs has done over the years. Take Docsis as an example. If you look at all the generations of Docsis, from Docsis 1, 1.1, 2, and 3, it's taken about 4.5 years start to finish, from the time we say go until first hardware gets deployed in the field and is generating revenue for the members. We're working on 3.1 where we're looking to take about 40% of that time out. So it's really about trying to drive that pace. Because when you think about 4.5 years, given my background, that's 3 Moore's Law cycles.
Okay.
A lot changes in that pace of time. So overall, we just got to pick up the entire pace of the industry. CableLabs understands its role because we're at the very front end. Things can't be deployed until CableLabs finishes its work.
Okay. And kind of tied into that whole innovation arena, I think it was November, you guys talked about creating an innovation team and moving to a new spot in Silicon Valley. So give us an update on maybe what's going on with the innovation team and the move to Silicon Valley.
Sure. When we talk about the innovation team, we're creating a small team that's really going to be focused on early experimentation. We're looking to take risks. We're looking for very high failure rates in those programs, but we're going to be really pushing the envelope. Those are fairly small projects versus the R&D, which would be things like Docsis and the work we do on video services like eBIF, et cetera. On the innovation team, that team will be split. It will be located both here in Colorado and also in Silicon Valley. The Silicon Valley facility, which we'll target to have open in August, will consolidate our San Francisco office. We're planning to have, over time, build that up to about 2 to 3 dozen people. And really its focus is outreach into the Valley. Really to show that cable is a great platform to innovate on top of and educate the marketplace locally, but also have that ability to bring the best and brightest in to work on the technologies with CableLabs.
Okay, are there any specific projects you can identify yet that the innovation team's working on?
Well, we've got 7 programs and projects underway within the innovation team already, and we're not at a point to share those as of yet. It's one of those things when when it's ready, we'll share those. But those things are really far out. CableLabs is pushing its planning horizon. So rather than being kind of focused on the 1 to 2 year planning horizon, CableLabs is focused on 3 to 8 years. And so when you think about our innovation team, the innovation pipeline, it's really those things are out there beyond the edge.
Okay, another thing that we're keeping an eye on, I think the cable industry is really keeping an eye on, is Ultra HD and 4K video. So does CableLabs have any specific initiatives or projects underway to kind of really just target on the Ultra HD topic?
Sure. We've built out a 4K lab at our facility here in Colorado, and we're looking at it not just from the standpoint of just display. In our lab, we do everything from actually shooting 4K, putting it through all the entire post-production, through the distribution models, really to understand where the challenges are going to be from the overall experience delivery. And then working with that with both display manufacturers and other parts of the vendor ecosystem to bring the whole solution together. Right now, everybody's all excited about 4K TVs. The question is one, where does content come from? And two, how do you get the content on the display? There's a new HDMI standard. There's lots of different pieces that have all got to come together to really make that work. We're also working with the production side of it, the actual content creators who are getting ready to think about shooting 4K to understand what their plans and what their timing is going to be. So it's an exciting time. Everybody gets really excited about 4K. It was the buzzword at CES this
it was.
year. The question is when is that going to become really a mainstream offering, and how do we make sure that cable's there with all the pieces?
Yeah, kind of if you factor in what you've been able to learn so far with 4K in terms of, there's really no content yet, or there's not a lot. The sets are super expensive. If you had to factor all that in, I mean, when do you think 4K will kind of become a mainstream technology or service?
Well, if you believe all the analysts that are out there, they're saying kind of that maybe Christmas of 15 is when you start seeing that price curve come down. Content starts to become available, particularly in the case of archived movies. A lot of people don't realize that the studios have been scanning all of the old films in 4K for the last 6 years. So there's a huge archive of 4K content that's already existed, but it was scanned for digital cinema, but it's ready and ripe. The question is how are you going to get that into the consumer's hands? What's that method of distribution? But ultimately, it really gets driven by display price. So once you get down into that curve where 4K becomes really within the price range for being the mainstream consumer, that's when I think you'll see it take off. Okay.
Now the last thing I wanted to ask you about was a big project at CableLabs with Docsis 3.1, right? So you're targeting 10 gigabits per second down by 1 gigabits per second up. I know that the specs are in development, so just get us up to speed in terms of how far along you are and kind of what your expectation is for the specs to be done.
Yeah, the specs are underway. We're on plan. What we said publicly is that the Docsis 3.1 first hardware will be late 14 with commercial deployments beginning in 2015. That's the planning cycle that we've communicated to the member communities. The members have been pretty supportive of that time frame and have publicly stated. In fact, at Cable Congress 2 weeks ago in London, the CTOs all stood on stage and were very pro 3.1, being aggressive on its deployment. So that's the time frame we're on. We are operating at a much faster pace. We've changed the process of how we're doing this specification. We're bringing the vendor community in much earlier in the process, so it's much more collaborative from the standpoint of bringing all those pieces together to make that timing. And as we see it right now, we're on track.
All right. Well, Phil, thanks a lot for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet.